Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Five years ago, I was working part-time at Ace Hardware after semi-retiring the year before. I had spent 38 years in the paint, home improvement, and hardware fields, and I just wanted to keep busy rather than sit around the house all day. The job was perfect for me since I became the paint specialist, which meant I got to wear different colored polo shirts instead of the usual red ones that other Ace employees wore. Back in 2001, they found sarcoma cancer in my upper left chest area and had to remove everything. The cancer, muscle, and whatever padding was there. What was left was just a thin layer of skin covering that spot. It made me a bit more careful about physical contact, but I didn't let it stop me from living my life. On this day, I had just gotten off work and was heading to Walmart to pick up my wife after her shift ended. Instead of waiting in the car, I decided to go inside and grab a few things we needed. I was still wearing my work clothes, khakis, black shoes, and that light blue polo with the big Ace Hardware logo on the left chest. When I walked through the store toward the auto section, I passed by the hardware area when I heard someone call out the old Ace slogan about Ace being the place. I looked over and saw it was Joe, a Walmart employee behind the paint desk. We knew each other from when I'd come shopping with my wife. Joe was a good kid, maybe 6 months into work in the hardware department, and he always wanted to learn more about the trade. Joe asked if I could help him out for a second because he was having trouble with a customer's project. The customer had questions about a painting job he was planning, and I could see Joe was struggling with some of the technical details. Having nearly 4 decades of experience, I was happy to help. I spent a few minutes explaining the best approach, what materials he'd need, and some helpful tips I picked up over the years. The customer seemed really grateful and thanked both Joe and me before heading off with what he needed. Joe thanked me and asked if my wife was getting off work soon. I told him she had about 10 minutes left on her shift. We chatted for a bit longer before I headed over to the auto section to find the windshield wipers I needed. Walmart has this computer system where you punch in your car's information and it tells you what size wipers to get. I found one 21-inch wiper easily enough, but I was digging through the messy display looking for the second one when I heard someone yell, "Excuse me," in that demanding tone. I turned around to see the most entitled woman you could imagine. She was in her 40s with that particular haircut, huge sunglasses perched on her head, dressed way too fancy for a Walmart shopping trip, and wearing enough gold jewelry to stock a small store. She told me I had taken my sweet time helping that customer in the paint section, and now I was going to help her. She needed wipers for her BMW. I figured she was just confused about the computer system, so I offered to show her how it worked. She refused my offer and told me I was going to get them for her. She said that was why I worked in this dump, so I could do my job. I told her I didn't work there. She insisted I did because I had been helping that man in the paint section and I was wearing the uniform. I pointed to the logo on my chest and asked if it said Ace Hardware or Walmart. She completely ignored what I was showing her and demanded that I get her what she wanted or she would get my manager and have me fired. I'd had enough of her attitude. I grabbed my second wiper and started walking away. She really lost it and started screaming about where I thought I was going. She yelled for me to get back there and demanded to know where my manager was because she was going to get me fired. Then I felt her hand grab my left shoulder and her fingernails dug right into that sensitive area where I'd had the cancer surgery. The pain was immediate and sharp. Her nails went right through the thin layer of skin. I yelped and instinctively grabbed her wrist with my right hand, squeezing hard to get her to let go. When I yanked her hand away and turned to face her, I pushed her back from me. She stumbled backward, hit the counter, and ended up sitting on the floor. Immediately, she started screaming that I had attacked her. Joe came running around the corner when he heard the commotion. I yelled for him to get a manager and security right away. I opened my polo shirt and felt around the area where she'd grabbed me. Sure enough, I was bleeding. She had actually torn the skin. I grabbed some tissues from a nearby display to try to stop the bleeding. A manager and security guard came rushing over within minutes. The manager asked what was going on, and Karen immediately claimed that their employee had attacked her. The manager helped her to her feet along with security, then asked which employee she meant and pointed at Joe. She said no and pointed at me instead. The manager explained that I didn't work there and that I worked for Ace Hardware, as anyone could see from my shirt. Karen demanded that I be fired, arrested, and said she was going to sue. The security guard came over to talk to me while Karen continued her tirade. I explained what had happened and told him I thought they should call the police. He took one look at the blood-soaked tissue I was holding and called for emergency medical technicians as well. Meanwhile, Karen was still yelling that she wanted me fired and arrested. She claimed I had assaulted her and tried to do inappropriate things to her. She just kept adding more accusations while she yelled down the aisle. The security guard had Joe bring me a chair and some towels and also asked him to find my wife. About 10 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. The first cop went to talk with Karen, who by then was claiming not only that I had beaten her up, but also that I had tried to assault her and steal her purse. The second cop came to speak with me. By this time, the EMTs and my wife had arrived. I had my shirt off, my upper chest was bloody with trails running down my stomach and starting to stain my khakis. The 2 officers stepped aside to talk to each other. Then the first cop asked the security guard about camera footage. They went off together to review it. I noticed Karen got really quiet when the security cameras were mentioned, which I found interesting. The EMTs finished cleaning me up and wanted to take me to the hospital, but I declined. When the first cop and security guard came back, Karen had this smug smile on her face like she thought she'd won. Both officers approached me and asked quietly if I wanted to press charges. I said yes without hesitation. They turned and walked toward Karen. When the first officer pulled out his handcuffs, she completely lost it and screamed that they should arrest me, not her. She threw her purse right at the first cop, hitting him in the face. Then she turned and tried to run. The second officer did this perfect flying tackle, taking her down to the floor and getting her cuffed in under a minute. When they hauled her away, she was charged with assault, filing a false police report, assaulting a police officer, resisting arrest, and probably a few other things I'm forgetting. I ended up having to wear my arm in a sling for several weeks so the torn skin could heal properly, along with this gooey medical gauze that had to be changed regularly. But watching Karen get tackled and arrested made every bit of the inconvenience worth it. The whole thing could have been avoided if she had just accepted that I didn't work there and used the computer herself. Instead, her entitlement and refusal to listen turned a simple misunderstanding into multiple felony charges. I work in accounting at a small company downtown. Most days are pretty routine. Numbers, spreadsheets, the occasional office birthday cake. But I also try to be a good friend. And that's what got me into this whole mess. My 2 closest friends had just had their first baby about 6 months earlier. New parents barely had time to shower, let alone go out for a nice meal. I've been watching them struggle with sleepless nights and diaper changes. When they mentioned they hadn't been to a real restaurant since the baby was born, I insisted on taking them out. My treat. We picked this family-friendly place that serves classic American comfort food. Burgers, fries, chicken tenders, that sort of thing. They're also famous for their ice cream sundaes. The kind of place where kids can be kids without getting dirty looks. Perfect for new parents still figuring out how to navigate public spaces with an infant. We got seated at a nice table. My friends seemed to be relaxing for the first time in months. Their baby was being an absolute angel, just sleeping peacefully in the high chair. We ordered our food and were actually having a normal adult conversation when the chaos started. At the table next to us sat what I can only describe as a small army. 2 parents and 3 kids who had enough energy between them to power a small city. Plus, they had an infant too. The kids were probably between 4 and 8 years old. They had clearly been raised in a household where volume equals authority. The parents weren't terrible people. They were trying to control their kids, but it was like trying to herd cats during a thunderstorm. The children were yelling, throwing food, climbing on their chairs. They treated the restaurant like their personal playground. The father kept threatening to leave if they didn't sit down immediately. The kids complained about everything: the food, each other, needing bathroom breaks right that second. The mother was constantly telling them not to move and to eat their food. This went on for about 30 minutes. The poor waitress kept coming by with that strained smile servers get when they're one complaint away from losing it. Other diners were shooting looks their way. My friends and I tried to focus on our own meal, but it was like trying to ignore a fire alarm. The father announced loudly that only he and his wife would be getting ice cream because they were the only ones who knew how to behave in a restaurant. You'd think this would calm the kids down. You'd be wrong. If anything, it made them worse. The protests got louder, the whining more intense. The parents tried everything: threatening looks, stern whispers, that tone parents use when they want to yell but can't because they're in public. Then the ice cream arrived for the parents and all hell broke loose. The kids decided to take their protest mobile. They jumped up from their table and started running around the restaurant like it was a playground. Other diners were pulling their purses closer, moving their chairs out of the way. The wait staff looked like they were one step away from calling security. That's when disaster struck. One of the kids, in his mad dash around the dining room, slammed right into my friend's baby's high chair. The impact wasn't huge, but it was enough to wake up their peacefully sleeping infant. The baby went from angelic silence to full-blown screaming in about 2 seconds. My friend looked like she was about to cry. This was their first time out in months, and now their baby was inconsolable. I was getting angry, but the mother at the other table decided to take action. She started banging her metal spoon against her glass sundae dish like she was ringing a dinner bell. She yelled at the kids to come back immediately. She warned them they knew what happened when she had to use the spoon at home. The clanging sound echoed through the restaurant. Other diners turned to stare, but it worked. The kids slowly trudged back to their table, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The mother took a triumphant bite of her ice cream. She probably felt like she'd finally regained control of the situation. Then her face changed completely. She got this look like she'd just tasted something horrible. She clapped both hands over her mouth and ran toward the bathroom. She was gone for maybe 5 minutes before coming back and whispering urgently to her husband. Whatever she told him made him lose what little control he had left. He shot up from his chair so fast it nearly tipped over. He started screaming that the restaurant was trying to kill his wife. He yelled about getting the whole place shut down. He called it negligence and attempted murder. His voice carried across the entire restaurant. Our poor waitress, who'd been dealing with this family all evening, came over to see what was wrong. He completely ignored her and walked toward the kitchen area. He demanded to see the manager immediately. He shouted about how they had put glass in his wife's ice cream and that she was bleeding. The manager appeared, looking confused and concerned, but the father pushed right past him. He zeroed in on this poor teenage kid who was working the ice cream station. The kid couldn't have been more than 17, just trying to make some spending money. Before anyone could react, the father grabbed the front of the kid's uniform and actually lifted him off the ground with one hand. I didn't think people could really do that outside of movies, but this guy was huge and the kid was pretty scrawny. The father screamed at the ice cream kid that he had tried to poison his wife. The terrified teenager said he didn't know what was happening and begged to be let go. That's when 2 other kitchen workers rushed out and grabbed the father's arms. It took both of them to make him release the kid. They told him to back off and threatened to call the cops if he didn't let the kid go. Just when things looked like they might get physical, the mother came running back from the bathroom. She shouted that she was bleeding and they needed to go to the hospital right away. The father dropped the ice cream kid, shook off the 2 workers. His whole family rushed out of the restaurant. When they left, he shouted back that they hadn't heard the last of this and that his lawyer would shut the place down. The restaurant went dead silent for a moment after they left. The manager, the waitress, and the kitchen staff all huddled together, trying to figure out what had just happened. The father had been so angry and incoherent that nobody really understood what he was claiming went wrong. A few minutes later, police cars pulled up outside. Someone had called them when the father got physical with the ice cream kid. The manager went out to talk to them while our waitress came back to our table, looking shaken. She apologized for what we had witnessed and asked how we wanted to pay for our meal. I was reaching for my debit card when something clicked in my brain. I've been watching the whole thing from our table and I'd seen exactly what happened. I told her that was really something, and that I couldn't understand how that guy didn't realize his wife had broken her own sundae dish and gotten glass in her ice cream. The waitress froze with my card in her hand. She asked me to repeat what I had just said. I explained that when the mother was banging the spoon against the glass dish to get the kid's attention, she had hit it too hard. I had seen a crack appear in the glass. When she took that bite of ice cream, she got glass in her mouth. The waitress's eyes went wide. She practically ran over to the manager and the police officers, and they all came back to our table. The police officer asked me to tell them exactly what I had seen. I walked them through the whole sequence of events. How the mother had been hitting the glass dish with a metal spoon. How I'd seen it crack. How she'd taken a bite right after that and then run to the bathroom. The manager asked if I was absolutely certain about this. I told him I was completely sure. She had caused the damage herself when she was trying to get her kids to behave. The manager looked like someone had just told him he'd won the lottery. He thanked me about 10 times and asked for my contact information in case they needed me if the family tried to sue. When we went to pay, we found out he'd comped our entire meal and given each of us cards for free ice cream sundaes. My friends were amazed. Their first night out in months had turned into dinner and a show plus free dessert. About a year later, I started getting phone calls from lawyers. First was someone representing the family. He sounded pretty depressed after I told him what I'd witnessed. The second call was from the restaurant's lawyer, who sounded absolutely thrilled. The restaurant's lawyer asked if I had actually seen her break the dish herself. I confirmed that, yes, definitely, she was hitting it with a metal spoon to get her kids' attention. He asked if I would be willing to testify to that if needed. I told him absolutely. I never did have to testify in court, but I heard that the family's lawsuit got thrown out pretty quickly once the restaurant's lawyers presented my witness statement. I had just finished my master's degree in recreation management and was back home for the summer before starting my career. I've been working as a lifeguard at this upscale fitness club since I was in college. The place had both indoor and outdoor pools, and because I'd been there for a few years and had my certifications, they promoted me to pool manager for the summer season. The fitness club was one of those fancy places where memberships cost a fortune and people expected everything to be perfect. Most of the members were pretty reasonable, but you always had a few who thought their membership fee meant they owned the place. I was nervous about being in charge because I'd always just been a regular lifeguard before, but I needed the experience and the money before my new job started. It was Labor Day weekend, which meant this was going to be one of my last shifts before I moved on to my career. Labor Day at any pool is crazy busy, but at this place it was like a perfect storm of families trying to squeeze in one last summer day. The outdoor pool was shaped like an L. At one end, we had a shallow area that sloped down from the deck, perfect for little kids. Then it got deeper into a 5-foot section for decent swimmers, and finally a 9-foot deep end where older kids and teens could jump in. Running along the side were 4 or 5 lap lanes for serious swimmers. That morning I found out the indoor pool was closed for maintenance. The indoor pool was usually where all the lap swimmers went because it was a proper 6-lane setup just for swimming back and forth. With it closed, the front desk was telling members they could either use our outdoor pool or drive to another facility across town. I knew we were going to get slammed with lap swimmers who normally use the indoor pool, so I made what I thought was a smart decision. I added one more lap lane to our outdoor setup. This meant taking a little bit of space away from the jumping area in the deep end, but there was still plenty of room for kids to have fun. I thought I was being proactive and helping everyone have a good experience. I spent the morning doing all my manager duties, testing the water chemistry, setting up umbrellas and chairs, making sure all the lifeguards knew their rotation schedule. When I set up that extra lane line, I double-checked that the deep end still had enough space. Kids could still jump in safely and swim around. It wasn't as spacious as usual, but it was totally reasonable. The gates opened at 10 in the morning and people started flooding in. Families with kids, teenagers, serious swimmers, with their goggles and kickboards. Everything was running smoothly. I was stationed at the manager's table near the first aid station, keeping an eye on everything and feeling pretty good about how the day was going. Then I heard it, that tone that every service worker dreads, a woman's voice getting louder and more demanding as she talked to one of my lifeguards. The woman was complaining that the pool setup was completely unacceptable and demanding to know why there were so many lap lanes today. The lifeguard tried to explain about the indoor pool being closed, but she wasn't having any of it. She didn't care about the indoor pool and insisted that her children and their friends needed more space to swim. Then came the words that made my stomach drop when she demanded to speak to the manager. I took a deep breath and walked over. The woman was probably in her 40s, wearing an expensive swimsuit cover-up. Behind her I could see a group of kids in the deep end who honestly looked like they were having a great time despite the slightly smaller space. I introduced myself as the pool manager and asked how I could help her. Karen immediately launched into her complaint about how I had changed the lane lines and how her kids didn't have enough room to jump into the pool. She demanded that I change them back right away. I tried to explain that I understood her concern about the space, but we had added an extra lap lane because the indoor pool was closed for maintenance. Since we were expecting more lap swimmers than usual, we wanted to accommodate everyone. I pointed out that there was still plenty of room in the deep end for jumping and swimming. Karen wasn't buying any of it. She asked if I was kidding and wanted to know what was wrong with the indoor pool and why those lap swimmers couldn't go swim somewhere else. She told me she had brought her kids and their friends there to enjoy one of their last days before school started, and I was ruining it. She demanded that I change those lanes back immediately. I looked over at her kids again. They were playing games and seemed to be having a blast. The space was a bit tighter than usual, but definitely not cramped. I apologized that she was upset, but explained that we made this decision because the indoor pool was completely closed that day. The front desk had been directing all lap swimmers to either come to our pool or visit other local facilities. I told her I couldn't control which option people chose, but we had set up the pool this way to handle the extra volume we knew we'd get. This whole conversation was making me incredibly anxious. I had dealt with upset customers before when I was just a lifeguard, but this was my first real confrontation as a manager. I was trying to stay calm and professional on the outside, but inside I was freaking out. My hands were starting to shake a little. Karen launched into the same complaint again, speaking slower and louder like I was an idiot who couldn't understand basic English. Then she started with the threats, asking if I knew how much she paid for her membership and claiming she knew the chief executive officer personally. She said this was completely unacceptable service. I explained the situation 2 more times, trying to stay patient and reasonable, but Karen had clearly decided I was the enemy. Right in front of me, she pulled out her phone and called the front desk. She told them she needed a manager down at the outdoor pool immediately because the pool manager was completely incompetent and was ruining her family's day. At the same time, I grabbed my walkie-talkie and called for the on-duty manager to come help with the situation. The on-duty manager showed up about 5 minutes later. He was this older guy who'd been working at the club forever and had seen every type of complaint imaginable. The 3 of us stepped outside the pool gate so we could talk without other members listening in. I started to explain the situation, laying out why we'd added the extra lane and how we were trying to accommodate everyone fairly. But Karen interrupted me, insisting that I was completely wrong and that her children were having their summer fun ruined because the pool was overcrowded. She demanded that I not only change those lanes back immediately, but that I should be fired for providing such terrible service. The manager listened to both sides, then asked to speak with me privately. We walked a few steps away from Karen. He told me that he knew I had made the right call with the lane setup, but this woman was one of their major donors. She gave a lot of money to the club beyond her membership fees. For the sake of keeping the peace and avoiding a bigger scene, we needed to change the lanes back. He said he knew it wasn't fair, but that's how it was. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Here I was, trying to do my job well and make good decisions, and I was being overruled because someone had more money than sense. I told him I understood, and that it would take about 5 minutes, and I'd need another lifeguard to help move the lane lines. We went back to Karen and told her we'd changed the setup. She looked smugly satisfied as the manager and I went into the pool area to move the lane line. It was embarrassing having to undo my decision in front of all the members and staff. When we finished opening up more space in the deep end, some of the nearby families actually clapped, which made me feel even worse. Karen walked away without even saying thank you, just a satisfied nod, like she'd won some important battle. I felt completely defeated and humiliated that she'd gotten her way through nothing but entitlement and threats. But here's where the story gets better. About 2 hours later, the aquatics supervisor showed up to take over the manager duties for the rest of the day. Before he officially took charge, I pulled him aside to explain what had happened. I walked him through the whole situation, why I'd added the lane, how Karen had complained, and how the on-duty manager had made me change it back. The supervisor told me that I had handled everything perfectly and that adding the extra lane was exactly the right decision for the day's circumstances. He said I shouldn't let the incident get to me. He asked me to point out Karen, who was still there with her kids. He nodded and told me he'd take care of things from here and that I should go enjoy the rest of my weekend. About 30 minutes later, I was gathering my stuff when one of the club executives approached me. She'd been doing laps during the whole Karen incident and had seen everything unfold. She thanked me for how professionally I had handled the situation earlier. She said I had made the right call with the pool setup and had stayed calm under pressure. She told me that woman was completely out of line. She explained that incidents like this get reported up the chain and that my handling of the situation would be noted positively in my file. It felt good to know that the people who actually mattered had seen what really happened. I never found out exactly what the supervisor said to Karen, but I noticed she left about an hour earlier than she usually did. The next time I worked a shift before my job ended, I heard from other staff that Karen had been spoken to about appropriate behavior toward employees. It wasn't some dramatic confrontation with security or anyone getting banned, but knowing that management had my back made all the difference. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.